Let's add to our employee class a generic method. So just a method called speak takes a generic type parameter t and no additional parameters. And just for debugging, let's console.writeLine type of t dot name. And let's see if we can invoke this using reflection. So I need to create a new employee. And I'll need a reference to a system.type for employees. So give me type of employee or employee.getType, either one. And then I need a reference to the method info for that speak method. So I can say employee type, please give me the method info for speak. And then typically what you do with reflection is you can say, let's invoke this method that we have on the employee. And I don't need to pass any additional parameters, so I'll pass null for the additional parameters to this method. This approach would usually work if we didn't have a generic method. But you can see the problem here is that we get an exception, invalid operation exception. Late bound operations cannot be performed on types or methods for which contains generic parameters is true. So once again, we have a situation where we're trying to use something that contains generic parameters. And it's just not possible to instantiate an object that still contains generic parameters. It's also not possible to invoke a method through a method info that contains generic parameters. But once again, there's a make method that is available to fix this problem. So I could say, okay, method info represents the metadata about this speak method. And what I need to do is say that this method info, I need to transform it into a generic method that I can actually invoke by passing some argument. So let's say that I want to pass a date time. Essentially, I want to call employee.speak with date time like this, but I want to do it through reflection, through this method info. And now that I have bound a generic argument to that method, I should be able to run the program, and I can call speak on the employee object, speak of date time, and that properly writes out the right name that we would expect if we invoked speak with a date time argument. So again, generics can add a little more complexity to your reflection code, but over the years I've personally run into some of these scenarios, and I've seen other people run into these scenarios of how do I construct a type that needs some generic arguments and I want to specify those arguments separately. That was the first example we did in the last clip. And the other problem is how do I invoke a method that needs a generic type parameter through reflection? Well, that's typically done by getting the method info, binding some generic arguments, and then invoking the method.